Imagine walking into one of the most electrifying stadiums in America, Dodger Stadium. The sun casting its golden glow across thousands of fans, the scent of popcorn and hot dogs mingling with the unmistakable buzz of anticipation. A baseball game, ordinary in its familiarity to most, is about to become the backdrop for a spectacle that no one could have predicted. And at the center of this chaos, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, stepping out not as guests to enjoy a sunny afternoon of sport, but as disruptors ready to ignite controversy. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What would you do if a royal couple suddenly grabbed microphones, stormed the field, and started speaking their truths about privacy, media intrusion, and personal injustice in front of thousands of strangers? Imagine the camera pans, the announcers' voices faltering mid-sentence, fans frozen between curiosity and disbelief, and security scrambling to contain a moment that was never meant to happen. This wasn't just a scene for tabloids or entertainment headlines. It was a shockwave, live, in real time, leaving fans, officials, and the world stunned. The story begins hours before the incident, hours that seemed ordinary but were anything but. Early that morning, Dodger Stadium was alive with activity. Vendors were setting up their stalls, the team bus rolled in, and fans queued for hours, unaware that history would be made on their field. Meanwhile, in a private, discreet area of the stadium, Meghan and Harry were planning. Not casual spectators, not fans here for the thrill of the game, but two individuals determined to use the platform of the stadium, a place of communal experience, celebration, and sportsmanship, to deliver a message that the world wasn't prepared to hear. The Duke and Duchess had long faced intense media scrutiny. Every move, every comment, every glance was analyzed, dissected, and often misrepresented. From tabloids to televised documentaries, their lives had been broadcast as public property. Their every joy, disappointment, and personal struggle had become fodder for a global audience. And yet, this afternoon, they would attempt something audacious. They would speak directly to the people, bypassing media filters, journalists, and official statements. Their stage would be the baseball diamond, their audience thousands of fans, with millions more watching online. It began subtly. The couple arrived just as the game was in full swing. At first, no one noticed. Royals attending sporting events wasn't unheard of, but what followed would shatter expectations. Meghan's calm confidence, Harry's focused intensity, their body language screamed purpose, urgency, and, most importantly, disruption. Every step toward the field seemed deliberate, rehearsed in its casualness, yet explosive in its intent. Fans in the stands noticed first, whispers turning into murmurs, murmurs into gasps. What were the Royals doing near the pitch? Why were they walking toward the field with such determination? Then came the realization that this wasn't a casual greeting, a photo op, or a wave to fans. They had microphones, amplifiers, a stage in the middle of the infield. And suddenly, the ordinary became extraordinary. What did they intend to say? Why this venue? Why now? These questions rippled through the stadium like shockwaves. Social media began to buzz before the words were even spoken. Fans captured the moment on their phones, posting blurry images of Meghan raising a hand, Harry stepping forward, and the stadium lights reflecting off their faces as if illuminating a secret ready to be revealed. The first words escaped their lips, and the reaction was immediate. Some fans cheered in support, moved by the audacity, the courage, and perhaps curiosity about what they might reveal. But most were stunned, some bewildered, many outraged. The reaction was chaotic, emotional, and unscripted. This was no ordinary interruption. It was a statement of defiance, a public assertion that they would not be silenced. And yet, as the microphones buzzed and security personnel scrambled, an even greater tension arose, the tension between freedom of speech and the sanctity of public events. In one corner, the Duke and Duchess were exercising what they believed was their right to speak openly about injustices they had endured. In another, officials were scrambling to maintain order, enforce rules, and prevent a potentially dangerous escalation. This collision of worlds, royal privilege and public protocol, created a drama that would be dissected for years to come. Consider for a moment the courage required to do what they did. Thousands of eyes on them. cameras rolling, social media poised to explode with every frame. And yet, despite the potential for ridicule, legal trouble, and backlash, they stepped forward. Their speech was more than just words. It was an assertion of identity, a confrontation with history, and a public airing of grievances. They were challenging not just the stadium's authority, but the broader cultural assumptions about who has the right to speak, where, and how. But the reaction was swift and brutal. Fans began booing almost instantly. Some waved signs of disapproval, others shouted over the microphones. Security teams moved with precision, pushing through the crowd and toward the couple. In mere moments, a scene that could have been a powerful statement became a chaotic clash. The royal couple, accustomed to controlling narratives through polished interviews or documentaries, faced unpredictability on a scale that no studio set could replicate. And yet, there was an undeniable spectacle in the chaos. Even as the crowd's reaction veered from support to disapproval and security moved in, the cameras continued rolling. Announcers stammered, commentators speculated, and millions of viewers online experienced a unique mix of fascination and shock. What was meant to be a message about privacy, media intrusion, and unfair treatment had now become a viral event in itself, magnifying the very issues they were addressing. The symbolism of the act cannot be overstated. Baseball, often called America's pastime, a sport with deep cultural roots, now served as a stage for royal commentary. A place of leisure had been transformed into a platform for political and personal discourse. Fans, media, and the public at large were forced to reconcile the contradiction. The spectacle of sport intersecting with the spectacle of royalty, creating a collision of worlds that felt both surreal and inevitable. And while the chaos was unfolding, one question dominated every conversation, every headline, every tweet. How would the authorities respond? The Dodgers organization, already grappling with the unexpected interruption, had to balance legal obligations, fan safety, and public relations. Any misstep could lead to reputational damage or worse. And yet, by the time the couple left the field, their message had already permeated the airwaves, social media, and the minds of viewers worldwide. But this introduction only scratches the surface. The true story, the moments before the interruption, the reasoning behind the bold decision, the immediate aftermath, the fan and media reactions, and the long-term consequences. Those layers are what we are about to unravel. Each detail, each contradiction, each emotional spike will pull you deeper into an account that feels almost too dramatic to be real. So, as we step into this story, ask yourself, would you have the courage to stand in front of thousands, knowing that every word could be dissected, criticized, or celebrated? Would you risk ridicule, legal trouble, or public outrage to speak your truth? Meghan and Harry made that choice. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment Meghan and Harry stepped out of the blacked-out SUV, the stadium seemed to pause. Not literally, of course, but in the collective consciousness of thousands. There was a sudden, almost imperceptible stillness. People were cheering, laughing, eating hot dogs, watching a pitcher wind up, and then the aura shifted. The air grew tense. Something was about to happen. Something none of them expected. Have you ever felt that electricity in a crowd just before something monumental? That prickling awareness that the ordinary is about to shatter? That's what it felt like at Dodger Stadium that afternoon. The couple moved with purpose, weaving through the sea of fans and staff, their presence commanding attention without uttering a single word. Meghan's eyes scanned the stands, a blend of calculation and empathy, while Harry's jaw tightened, the visible mark of a man steeling himself for confrontation. The fans closest to the entrance noticed first. At first, it was curiosity, whispers, subtle pointing, the occasional camera flash. Then disbelief. A royal couple? Here? In Los Angeles? On a regular game day? Some reached for their phones, instinctively documenting what they thought might be a rare sight, perhaps just a fleeting appearance. Others froze, unsure how to react. Social norms were being challenged in real time. Walking into a stadium packed with tens of thousands is not like attending a private event. Every step is magnified, every glance scrutinized, every gesture interpreted. Meghan and Harry knew this, and yet they moved forward as though the field itself belonged to them. They weren't just attending a game. They were preparing to take it over. And the thought sent ripples through security personnel, stadium staff, and nearby fans alike. But why this game? Why Dodger Stadium? Why not a private venue, a televised interview, or even a staged event? The answer lies in the symbolism. Baseball, often called the heartbeat of American culture, represents community, shared experiences, and tradition. By choosing this stage, Meghan and Harry were not just delivering a message. They were confronting an institution in a way that could not be ignored. They wanted visibility, impact, disruption. They wanted a moment that would echo beyond the confines of the stadium. And the way they approached it added layers of intrigue. They didn't rush or charge forward in a chaotic sprint. Their entrance was calculated, deliberate, almost cinematic. Meghan's dress swayed with each step, her posture regal yet relaxed. Harry's suit jacket was buttoned just so, his expression a mixture of anticipation and defiance. They moved together as a unit, not as two individuals, but as a single force with a shared agenda. Fans in the upper stands began to murmur, recognizing them but unsure of what to make of the sight. Was it a scheduled appearance? A photo opportunity? A private gesture? The questions hung in the air like fog, thickening with every second that passed. And then came the first sign that this was no ordinary royal visit. The small black microphones in their hands, gleaming under the stadium lights. That detail alone transformed curiosity into tension. Microphones aren't casual accessories. They signal communication, amplification, authority. And here, in the middle of a baseball game, they hinted at an unsanctioned performance. The whispers grew louder. Phones came out. Security glanced at each other, the tension obvious in their sharp glances and quickened steps. Something was about to happen, and no one was fully prepared. You have to imagine the stakes. Tens of thousands of fans, some casual, some die-hard Dodgers supporters, all oblivious to the storm about to break. Broadcast cameras capturing every move for national and international audiences. Social media users poised to catch the first viral clip. And there, in the center of it all, Meghan and Harry, deliberately standing apart from the ordinary, ready to challenge norms and expectations in a single audacious moment. But let's not overlook the human element, the internal tension, the emotion running through both of them. Meghan, often described as poised and graceful, had moments where her hands clenched briefly, subtle signs of nerves masked by her composed exterior. Harry, known for his temper and passionate convictions, had a gaze that scanned the crowd, measuring reactions, anticipating consequences. Behind the calm surface was a storm, the anticipation of judgment, the thrill of defiance, and the adrenaline of taking control of a narrative that had long been manipulated by others. Meanwhile, the stadium itself seemed to become a character in this unfolding drama. The scent of popcorn, the bright sunlight reflecting off the field, the chatter of fans, and the distant crack of a bat hitting a baseball, all contrasted starkly with the tension radiating from two figures preparing to disrupt an ordinary afternoon. The juxtaposition made the moment feel almost surreal. Ordinary life and extraordinary action collided in a single frame. Fans began reacting in clusters. Some cheered nervously, unsure if support was appropriate. Others whispered in disbelief, trying to rationalize the scene unfolding in front of them. A few skeptics shouted, "Get off the field." Their voices were drowned in the rising hum of anticipation. The stadium had shifted from a venue of recreation to a pressure cooker of speculation, emotion, and suspense. And then came the subtle signs of preparation that would go unnoticed by most. Security personnel adjusted their stances, communicating with subtle hand signals. Stadium announcers muttered into headsets, trying to verify what was happening. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every gesture. All the while, Meghan and Harry inched closer to the field, each step deliberate, purposeful, and charged with intent. It's worth pausing to consider the audacity of their decision. Millions had watched them navigate public life with a mix of reverence, criticism, and fascination. To step onto the field uninvited, in a public setting, to speak without permission, it was unprecedented. No amount of prior media training could fully prepare anyone for the unpredictability of thousands of live spectators, flashing cameras, and instantaneous social media reactions. And yet, they moved forward with confidence, undeterred by potential embarrassment, criticism, or consequence. But the true tension, the heartbeat of this moment, came not from the crowd, the cameras, or the stadium, but from the anticipation of the moment itself. The microsecond before action, that is where all stakes converge. Every eye on the field, every heartbeat in the stands, every broadcaster waiting for a cue, all aligned, unknowingly, for what would be a defining instant of spectacle, controversy, and historical consequence. The couple reached the edge of the infield, the grass stretching beneath their feet, a physical boundary separating them from the ordinary routine of the game. Fans craned their necks. Security tensed. Cameras zoomed. It was the calm before the storm. And in that moment, the air was electric, thick with the promise of chaos. But what exactly were they about to do? What words would they speak into the microphones? Would the stadium erupt into cheers or descend into outrage? Could they control the narrative they were so desperate to reclaim? Or would this moment spiral beyond anyone's grasp? And most importantly, how would the world respond to a royal couple using America's pastime as a stage for their personal message? Little did anyone know, the next few minutes would redefine how the public perceives privilege, audacity, and the intersection of celebrity with public spaces. The stage was set. The players were in position. The world, entirely unprepared, was about to witness something extraordinary. And just as the couple took their first deliberate steps onto the field proper, the stadium erupted, not with the cheers they might have anticipated, but with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and chaos that would escalate faster than anyone could imagine. What came next would ignite controversy, draw international attention, and lead to consequences that no one, not even the couple themselves, could have predicted. Have you ever wondered what goes through someone's mind the moment they decide to break every rule in the book? To step into a place where they are not invited, where the eyes of thousands, maybe millions, are trained on them, and announce their truth? That's exactly where Meghan Markle and Prince Harry found themselves as they stood at the edge of Dodger Stadium's infield, microphones in hand, hearts pounding, and stakes higher than any game being played on that field. The crowd had erupted into murmurs and scattered applause, but that didn't matter to them. Their focus was singular. They had come with purpose. This wasn't about casual engagement, celebrity sightseeing, or joining the social elites for a baseball game. This was a deliberate, calculated move to seize attention, control the narrative, and deliver a message they felt could no longer wait. And to understand the gravity of that moment, we need to look at the hidden agenda driving their audacious actions. For years, Meghan and Harry had been trapped in a media storm. Every move, every statement, every glance had been dissected, misrepresented, and exploited. Royal protocol dictated silence, decorum, and carefully curated public appearances. Breaking from that mold wasn't just a preference. It was a necessity for survival. They had attempted interviews, documentaries, and public speeches, but those formats never gave them full control. There were editors, producers, media biases, always intermediaries. And that's why a live, unscripted appearance in the middle of a baseball game became their radical solution. They needed a platform where no one could filter their message, no one could dilute their grievances, and no one could dictate the tone of their narrative. But there was more than just the desire to be heard. There was strategy, symbolism, and a subtle, almost theatrical sense of rebellion at play. Consider the venue. Baseball is a game rooted in tradition, rules, and ritual. To storm such a space was to challenge order itself. It was a metaphorical declaration. We will not conform to the expectations placed upon us, and we will take our truth directly to the people, wherever we choose. Behind closed doors, the couple had planned this moment meticulously. Security concerns had been evaluated, timing had been considered, and even the microphones, the ones that would amplify their voices across the stadium, were part of a deliberate plan. They weren't just improvising. They were performing a calculated act of disruption. And yet, for all the preparation, the unpredictability of live reactions made it as thrilling as it was terrifying. Their hidden agenda also extended to content. They weren't going to deliver vague statements about royalty or fleeting media grievances. They intended to speak about specific injustices, about the constant intrusion into their lives, about a system that had stripped them of privacy and autonomy. Each word was chosen not just for impact, but for resonance, aiming to elicit empathy, shock, and awareness. And then there was the human element, emotion. You could see it in Meghan's eyes as she scanned the crowd, measuring reactions, preparing herself for the backlash she knew would come. You could see it in Harry's tense posture, the tightness in his jaw, the fire behind his gaze. They were not merely making a statement. They were confronting decades of pressure, scrutiny, and expectation, all while navigating a crowd that could support, mock, or reject them in a heartbeat. What's particularly fascinating is the contradiction inherent in their decision. On one hand, they sought control, control of the message, control of perception, control of the narrative. On the other, they were surrendering themselves to one of the most unpredictable audiences imaginable. Thousands of fans, many of whom had no allegiance to them, were about to decide in real time how this moment would be received. That tension between control and chaos created an emotional charge that electrified the stadium long before a word was spoken. But there were risks beyond embarrassment. Legally, there was the question of trespassing. Stadium rules are strict. Security protocols are not suggestions. And yet, Meghan and Harry, guided by a combination of courage and calculated risk-taking, pressed forward. Their hidden agenda wasn't reckless. It was intentional, an act of defiance meant to challenge the status quo, provoke reaction, and reclaim a voice they felt had been systematically denied. In a way, their move mirrored a kind of guerrilla theater. Imagine for a moment an activist organization planning a high-stakes, unannounced demonstration. The goal isn't just the statement itself, it's the shock, the disruption, the forcing of observers to confront the message in real time. Meghan and Harry were executing precisely that strategy, leveraging the spectacle of their presence, their fame, and the charged atmosphere of the stadium to ensure the world would pay attention. And yet, amidst all this strategy, one cannot ignore the personal stakes. This was more than a public declaration. It was deeply intimate. Every word, every gesture, every glance carried the weight of their lived experience. The criticism, the betrayals, the isolation. Their presence on the field was as much about claiming agency as it was about sending a message. It was a declaration that, despite what the world might think, they would not be silenced. There was also a calculated element in timing. They didn't choose the pregame, when the spectacle might be diluted by ceremony and festivities. They didn't choose after the game, when energy and attention might wane. They chose mid-inning, a moment when the game's rhythm was at its peak, when fans' attention was divided but focused, and when any interruption would maximize visibility. It was audacious, it was brilliant, and it was entirely unpredictable. Fans may not have realized it in that moment, but what they were witnessing was a complex orchestration of risk, symbolism, and personal narrative. The couple had mastered public perception through controlled interviews and documentaries. But here, in this charged environment, they were attempting something raw, unfiltered, and infinitely more dangerous. They were taking a gamble that the world would see not just the disruption, but the message behind it. But the hidden agenda went even deeper. Beyond media attention and public sympathy, this moment was also about legacy. Meghan and Harry were acutely aware that the optics of royalty in America were different from those in the United Kingdom. They understood that their actions, whether praised or criticized, would be dissected and remembered. This wasn't just a statement for the day, it was a defining act, one that could influence public perception, media narratives, and even historical accounts of their lives. And while fans, commentators, and officials waited with bated breath, the first subtle movements signaled that the moment of delivery was near. Meghan adjusted her microphone, a small but significant gesture. Harry's gaze swept the stands one last time, scanning faces, reading energy, sensing reactions. Every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat was attuned to the moment just before history would be made. There was tension, a delicate, almost unbearable tension that coiled through the stadium, charging the air with expectation. Some fans had already sensed that something unprecedented was about to happen. Others were oblivious, distracted by the game itself, unaware that the ordinary afternoon would soon be transformed into spectacle, controversy, and media frenzy. And then, just as the couple seemed poised to speak, a subtle but crucial question hung in the air. Would the words land as intended? Would they be met with understanding, outrage, or indifference? The risk of misinterpretation was enormous. A single misstep could turn courage into scandal, defiance into humiliation, and personal revelation into public ridicule. Yet, Meghan and Harry pressed forward, driven by conviction, strategy, and the undeniable force of their hidden agenda. They had reached the tipping point, the threshold between ordinary spectators and audacious disruptors. Their voices were about to pierce the noise of the stadium, to challenge expectations, and to confront the world directly. What they said next would ignite chaos, spark outrage, and become the catalyst for an event that no one would forget. The hidden agenda had been set into motion. The players were in position, and the world, entirely unprepared, was about to be captivated by a spectacle that blurred the lines between reality, performance, and rebellion. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever witnessed a moment so sudden, so audacious, that it felt like time itself paused? That's exactly what happened at Dodger Stadium the instant Meghan Markle and Prince Harry stepped fully onto the infield. The ordinary rhythm of the game, the crack of the bat, the roar of fans, the announcer's casual chatter, shattered in an instant. The interruption wasn't just physical, it was psychological, emotional, and cultural. It was a moment designed to be unforgettable. The first thing that struck everyone was the sheer audacity of the act. Royals stepping onto a Major League Baseball field uninvited, during a live game, with microphones in hand. Fans froze, unsure whether to cheer, laugh, or flee. Security officers glanced at each other, assessing protocol, weighing options, and recognizing that this was not a drill. Announcers stammered, their voices faltering as they attempted to process the unprecedented scene unfolding in front of millions of viewers. And then, Meghan spoke. Not loudly at first, but enough to catch attention. Her voice, calm yet deliberate, rippled through the stadium's speakers. The words themselves were carefully chosen, precise, carrying layers of meaning and emotion, references to privacy, to media intrusion, to the challenges of life in the public eye. Every sentence was designed to provoke thought, to challenge assumptions, and to confront injustice. The message was not subtle. It was meant to be disruptive, confrontational, and impossible to ignore. But the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Some fans erupted in supportive applause, drawn to the courage and conviction in her voice. Others jeered, waving their arms, shouting objections, or simply stunned into silence. The stadium had split into factions, each reacting differently to the same words. Social media feeds lit up instantly as bystanders streamed live videos, posted photos, and debated the significance of the interruption in real time. Harry followed, stepping forward with a similar deliberate intensity. His words carried anger, frustration, and a pointed critique of systems that he claimed had failed them. But unlike Meghan, who maintained a composed, almost clinical delivery, Harry's tone wavered with raw emotion, a mix of defiance and vulnerability. The juxtaposition between their approaches heightened the drama, capturing the audience in a powerful, almost cinematic tension. It's worth pausing to consider the emotional dynamics in play. Here was a couple accustomed to public scrutiny, accustomed to criticism, and yet willing to confront both head-on in the most public way imaginable. Their bodies radiated both tension and determination. Their movements were deliberate but human, full of emotion, subtle nervous gestures, and the kind of vulnerability that only someone truly committed to a message can project. Fans began to respond not just verbally, but physically. Some stood, craning their necks to get a better view. Others began recording, capturing every angle of the historic interruption. Security personnel advanced cautiously, hands raised but non-confrontational, weighing the balance between safety and escalation. The announcers tried to resume commentary but faltered, their usual play-by-play drowned out by the spectacle unfolding live. And then the unforeseen happened. A group of particularly vocal fans began chanting, "Get off the field." The jeers turned into a cacophony, clashing with the supportive applause of others. In that moment, the stadium had transformed into a theater of chaos, a microcosm of public opinion in action, unfiltered, loud, and unrelenting. The tension was palpable, a living thing that spread from the infield to the stands, vibrating through every person present. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry pressed forward, undeterred. They were aware of the cameras, of the live broadcast, of the thousands in the stadium and millions online. Every word, every pause, every gesture was calculated to maximize impact. They were no longer merely speaking. They were performing, commanding attention, and manipulating perception in real time. The interruption also had a strategic element. By choosing a moment in the game when attention was fragmented but focused, mid-inning, with players preparing for the next pitch, they ensured that no single narrative dominated. Fans were forced to process multiple streams of sensory information: the ongoing game, the unexpected presence of royals, and the content of their speech. It was disorienting, compelling, and impossible to ignore. Security teams began converging, moving in from multiple directions, creating a human perimeter around the couple. Their movements were precise, professional, but cautious. There was a risk of escalation, of panic, and of injury. The stadium had become a pressure cooker, and every second brought it closer to an eruption that no one could fully predict. Yet, even as security advanced, Meghan continued. Her tone shifted slightly, more assertive, more insistent. She directly addressed the crowd, challenging assumptions, asking questions that cut to the heart of public perception. Why should privacy be a privilege only for some? How does media scrutiny shape the narrative of truth? Can a person ever truly exist in public life without their life being dissected, judged, or exploited? These were not rhetorical questions. They were probes, invitations for the audience to reflect, to engage, and to reconsider their own complicity in the culture of spectacle. Harry, standing slightly behind her, nodded at intervals, adding emphasis to her points. He too addressed the audience, his words tinged with frustration but also with vulnerability. He revealed personal struggles, fears, and moments of public humiliation. The combination of Meghan's controlled delivery and Harry's raw emotion created a dynamic tension that captivated the audience, both live and digital. But then, just as the words reached a crescendo, the stadium responded in full force. The volume of booing, shouting, and chanting escalated. Security began closing in more aggressively. Camera crews were shoved aside in some cases, bystanders jostled for position. The couple's interruption had triggered a cascade of events that no one, not even the couple, could entirely control. The emotional stakes were now visible on every face. Fans unsure whether to cheer or jeer, security staff balancing protocol with human judgment, and the couple themselves navigating the immediate consequences of their unprecedented action. Every second stretched longer, charged with unpredictability, danger, and drama. And then, in that moment of heightened chaos, something extraordinary happened. Meghan, sensing the rising tension, paused mid-sentence. She looked directly into the cameras, into the lenses that would carry this moment across the globe. Her gaze was unwavering, demanding attention, demanding respect, demanding understanding. Harry stepped closer, subtly shielding her as security advanced. The pause was almost cinematic, a beat of suspense that magnified the impact of everything they had said and everything they were about to say next. The interruption had achieved its purpose. The stadium, the audience, and the world were fully engaged. The words had landed, the disruption was complete, and the reaction was immediate, visceral, and unpredictable. Fans were shouting, some recording, others debating loudly, security teams coordinating, and commentators struggling to regain control of the narrative. But here's the paradox. While the interruption had amplified their message, it also escalated the stakes exponentially. The consequences of speaking without permission, of breaking stadium rules, and of confronting public expectation in such a raw, unfiltered way were now unavoidable. The couple had created a spectacle, yes, but also a problem that someone, somewhere, would have to address. And in the midst of the escalating chaos, the crowd began to realize something. This wasn't a moment that could be erased. This wasn't a fleeting incident. The interruption had set off a chain reaction that would ripple far beyond the stadium, through social media, international news, and the collective imagination of the public. And the most shocking part? The couple wasn't finished. What came next would push the boundaries of public perception even further, draw international attention, and force everyone involved, fans, security, media, and the royal couple themselves, to confront a reality that was far more explosive than anyone could have anticipated. The interruption had begun. The chaos had escalated. and the stage was set for a moment that would redefine the intersection of celebrity, royalty, and public spectacle. But what came next would shock even those who thought they had seen it all, and no one was prepared for the fallout that followed. Have you ever been in a moment so intense that the air itself feels charged, every heartbeat amplified, every whisper and murmur magnified? That's exactly what it felt like at Dodger Stadium the instant Meghan Markle and Prince Harry began delivering their unsanctioned speech. The interruption was over. That chaotic first act had set the stage, but now came the main event. Words, carefully chosen yet raw with emotion, would now sweep across the field, the stands, and the world beyond. Meghan stepped slightly forward, microphone in hand, her posture commanding, her gaze sweeping across the stadium as if she were both the speaker and the observer, the storyteller and the judge. Harry stood beside her, tense yet resolute, the embodiment of determination and defiance. Together, they had transformed the infield into an arena of spectacle and confrontation. And then Meghan spoke, her voice calm, measured, but cutting through the hum of the stadium like a sharp blade. The opening lines were deliberate, carefully framed to capture attention, references to privacy, media scrutiny, and the sense of injustice they had endured as a couple. The words were not abstract complaints. They were pointed, personal, and impossible to ignore. Every syllable carried a weight of lived experience. Fans craned their necks, unsure whether to cheer, jeer, or simply absorb the audacity of the moment. The stadium had become a courtroom, the couple its plaintiffs, and the world its jury. Harry added his voice shortly after, his tone a mix of frustration, defiance, and vulnerability. Unlike Meghan, whose composure created a controlled delivery, Harry's voice occasionally cracked with emotion. He shared anecdotes, subtle references to past slights, and pointed critiques of media institutions that had pursued them relentlessly. The contrast between their styles heightened the drama. The calm precision of Meghan counterbalanced by the raw emotion of Harry, creating a dynamic tension that held the audience spellbound. Fans reacted in real time. Some cheered, drawn to the courage and audacity on display. Others booed, unable to reconcile their personal loyalty to the sport with the intrusion into the game. Some shouted questions or objections. Security officers tightened their perimeter, creating a buffer between the royals and the unpredictable crowd. Cameras panned frantically, trying to capture every angle, every reaction, every nuance. Social media exploded, live streams instantly going viral, hashtags trending globally before the speech had even ended. The speech itself was remarkable not only for its content, but also for its strategy. Meghan and Harry were deliberate in sequencing their points. They began with a critique of intrusive media coverage, grounding their grievances in personal experiences that would resonate with anyone who had ever felt misrepresented or misunderstood. They layered in commentary on the broader cultural implications of privacy and celebrity, challenging the audience to consider the ethical dimensions of fame. And throughout, they maintained a subtle rhythm, measured pauses, shifts in tone, emphasis on key phrases that ensured their words would land, be remembered, and provoke discussion long after the event concluded. The emotional impact was undeniable. You could see it on the faces of fans: surprise, admiration, confusion, and occasionally anger. Some cried quietly, touched by the honesty, the vulnerability, the courage to speak so openly in such a public forum. Others shook their heads in disbelief, unable to process the breach of etiquette, protocol, and tradition. The stadium had become a living organism, responding to every word, gesture, and glance in real time. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was an almost theatrical quality to the delivery. Meghan and Harry moved deliberately, using subtle gestures to underscore their points. Hands were raised at precise moments. Pauses allowed murmurs and reactions to swell and recede. They weren't merely speaking. They were performing, commanding attention with every motion, every intonation, every look. The infield had been transformed into a stage, and the audience, both in the stands and online, had become an unwitting cast in a performance they could neither escape nor ignore. Some of the content was particularly provocative. References to systemic injustice, the pressures of living under relentless scrutiny, and critiques of institutions that were supposed to protect them resonated deeply, while also sparking immediate controversy. Fans shouted, debates erupted in the stands, and social media users typed furiously, debating the ethics, the audacity, and the historical significance of what they were witnessing. But there was also humor woven subtly throughout the speech. Dry, understated, almost ironic. Meghan occasionally inserted a pointed quip, a clever observation that drew unexpected laughter or murmurings from the crowd. Harry, too, added moments of self-deprecation, grounding the grandeur of their narrative in the very human experience of frustration, embarrassment, and resilience. These moments were deliberate, humanizing, and disarming, ensuring the audience was engaged not only intellectually but emotionally. As the speech continued, the stakes escalated. Security teams moved closer, whispering into earpieces, signaling each other, trying to gauge whether intervention was necessary. Fans' reactions became louder, more varied, more unpredictable. Some attempted to get closer, craning over railings or waving phones to capture footage. Others argued heatedly with neighbors, unsure whether to cheer, boo, or remain silent. The stadium had become a microcosm of public debate, every individual reacting in their own way, yet collectively creating an atmosphere of tension, unpredictability, and spectacle. The couple's message also carried layers of contradiction and paradox. They were criticizing intrusion while intentionally creating a massive spectacle. They were demanding understanding while simultaneously defying protocol. These contradictions only heightened the emotional complexity, forcing observers to grapple with discomfort, admiration, skepticism, and curiosity simultaneously. It was a speech that demanded attention and reflection, a speech that couldn't be ignored even if one wanted to. And just as the climax approached, Meghan and Harry delivered the most powerful lines, the emotional core of their argument. The words were direct, personal, and unapologetic, touching on themes of identity, resilience, and autonomy. The delivery was precise, measured, and charged with emotion. Fans gasped, some whispered to one another, and social media feeds exploded with commentary, memes, and reactions. The moment felt both immediate and historic, ephemeral yet destined to linger in public consciousness. But the world wasn't just watching passively. Media outlets scrambled to broadcast live reactions, sports commentators struggled to regain control of the narrative, and journalists prepared to dissect every word. Legal experts and stadium officials began discussing potential repercussions, ranging from trespassing charges to permanent bans. The speech, while profoundly impactful, had set off a chain reaction that extended far beyond the confines of the stadium. And then it happened, the moment that would make the speech unforgettable. Fans began booing, some loudly, some in murmurs that quickly grew into waves of sound. Security personnel converged, moving quickly to create a perimeter and guide the couple off the field. Meghan and Harry, undeterred, continued their delivery, insisting on finishing their message despite the mounting chaos. Every second was charged with risk, physical, reputational, and emotional. The speech had achieved its purpose, attention, impact, and global conversation. But it had also escalated the consequences exponentially. The couple's words had ignited debate, fueled outrage, and drawn international scrutiny. And the true aftermath, the bans, the official statements, the global media storm, had only just begun. What came next would transform the narrative from spectacle to scandal. The interruption had captured attention, but the fallout would dominate headlines, social media, and public debate for weeks. Fans, officials, and observers alike would soon realize that this was no ordinary act of defiance. It was a moment that would leave a permanent mark on both the stadium and the couple's public image. And in the midst of it all, the lingering question remained. How far would they go to deliver their message? And what would the consequences be when the stadium authorities finally intervened? The speech had shaken Dodger Stadium, but what came next would push the event beyond disruption into outright chaos, and no one was ready for what was about to unfold. The moment Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's words reverberated across Dodger Stadium, the game and the audience both seemed suspended in a bizarre limbo. But reality was about to hit, and it came in the form of the stadium's security teams. Trained for emergencies, prepared for crowds, and experienced in handling everything from unruly fans to medical crises. They now faced an unprecedented challenge. Two royals deliberately defying rules, commanding attention, and refusing to leave. Security moved quickly, not recklessly, but with a precision born of training and protocol. Officers fanned out, creating human barricades, guiding fans away from the field, and attempting to isolate the couple without escalating the tension. Every step had to be measured, every approach carefully calculated. This wasn't just about authority. It was about safety, perception, and maintaining order in a highly charged environment. And yet, Meghan and Harry were undeterred. They knew the optics of confrontation would amplify their message. Every inch the security team advanced, every gesture they made, became material for the spectacle. The couple's calm defiance contrasted sharply with the controlled urgency of the security officers, creating a tension that was palpable not only in the stadium, but across the globe via live broadcasts and social media. Fans were caught in the middle. Some cheered, some shouted, some filmed in awe, others argued among themselves. The chaos created a surreal sense of theater. A royal couple challenging authority in one corner, security strategizing in another, and thousands of spectators processing, reacting, and capturing it all in real time. The stadium had transformed into a live stage for conflict, spectacle, and history. The first line of physical intervention came subtly. A pair of officers stepped forward, hands raised but non-threatening, attempting to politely guide Meghan and Harry off the field. "Excuse me, Your Highnesses, we need you to step back," one officer said calmly, though his tone carried unmistakable urgency. The couple's response was almost imperceptible at first, a slight shake of the head, a deliberate pause, a look of quiet determination. They weren't defying security out of recklessness. They were performing a calculated act of disruption. But the tension escalated quickly. More officers approached from multiple angles, converging on the couple while maintaining a perimeter around the audience. The crowd responded. Shouts of support clashed with chants of disapproval. Phones rose in unison, broadcasting the confrontation to millions of online viewers. For many, it was a spectacle of audacity, courage, and chaos. A collision of celebrity, authority, and public expectation all unfolding in real time. And then, the real pressure began to mount. Security had to consider the safety of the royals, themselves, the fans, and even the players on the field. Any sudden movement could trigger panic. Any misstep could result in injury or worse. And yet, Meghan and Harry continued to speak, each word deliberate, each pause amplifying the dramatic tension. Their defiance had become a challenge not just to the stadium, but to the very idea of public order. As the standoff intensified, the dynamics of power became evident. Security had authority, training, and numbers. The couple had charisma, fame, and the undeniable magnetism of defiance. Each side understood the stakes. Officers whispered into headsets, signaling updates and strategies. Meghan adjusted her stance slightly, signaling readiness. Harry's jaw tightened as he gauged the distance, the angles, the reactions. Every movement was a calculation, a chess game played out on grass, surrounded by thousands of spectators. But it wasn't just physical control at stake. There was perception, optics, and legacy. Security could remove them from the field, but the optics of doing so, literally lifting royals against their will in front of cameras, carried enormous consequences. How would fans react? How would the media spin the story? How would history remember this moment? Each officer knew they were part of a high-stakes drama that transcended the stadium itself. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry subtly escalated their tactics. Meghan's voice rose, commanding attention, emphasizing key points. Harry positioned himself strategically, creating a human buffer with his presence and subtly signaling determination. Their body language was both defiance and performance. Security teams adjusted, circling carefully, trying to anticipate every gesture, every shift in stance. The crowd mirrored the tension. Some fans were shouting, imploring the couple to finish and leave. Others were filming, some debating loudly among themselves, and others reacting emotionally to the content of the speech. The energy of thousands of people was focused on a single point, the standoff in the middle of the baseball diamond. Every heartbeat, every whisper, every gasp added to the atmosphere of suspense. At one point, a young fan in the front row shouted, "Let them speak." The comment, small in isolation, reflected a larger divide, support and opposition clashing in real time. Security had to navigate not just the couple but the volatile crowd, balancing authority with restraint and trying to prevent escalation without appearing aggressive or authoritarian. The stakes were enormous. Every decision mattered. And then, the first attempt at physical redirection occurred. A team of officers moved closer, signaling politely, attempting to guide the couple toward the sidelines. Meghan raised a hand in acknowledgement but refused to step back. Harry subtly shifted to maintain his position next to her, standing firm. It was a delicate standoff, authority versus defiance, procedure versus spectacle, power versus perception. Fans erupted. Some cheered in support, seeing courage in the act. Others booed, feeling the violation of tradition and protocol. Security officers had to remain vigilant, coordinating quietly through headsets, moving with precision, and preparing for rapid escalation. Every gesture, every shift, every word had consequences, legally, socially, and emotionally. And just when it seemed the tension had peaked, an unexpected twist occurred. A few security officers hesitated, unsure whether to physically engage due to the live cameras capturing every move. That hesitation created a momentary lapse, a fleeting opportunity for the couple to continue their speech uninterrupted. The drama intensified. Every second stretched longer, more suspenseful, more precarious. This was not just a battle of authority. It was a test of strategy, resilience, and narrative control. Meghan and Harry were executing a high-stakes performance, aware that the audience, the media, and the world were watching every move. Security was responding with discipline, caution, and professional instinct. And the crowd? They were caught in the eye of the storm, experiencing a spectacle unlike any they had ever witnessed at a baseball game. By now, it was clear, this was no ordinary security incident. This was a clash of worlds, celebrity versus protocol, spectacle versus order, defiance versus authority. And it was escalating rapidly. The stakes had gone far beyond a mere interruption of a baseball game. Legal ramifications, public opinion, and global media attention hung in the balance. And then, at the very moment when security prepared for their next move, Meghan and Harry made a subtle but decisive gesture. A glance, a pause, a shift in posture, signaling that the confrontation was far from over. The standoff had reached a critical threshold. The audience leaned forward collectively, sensing that the next moment would redefine the story entirely. What happened next would escalate the drama to unprecedented heights, force the stadium authorities to make impossible decisions, and ensure that the world would never see a sporting event the same way again. The security response had begun. But the consequences of this standoff were only just starting to unfold. Have you ever been part of a crowd when something utterly unexpected happens, when the ordinary rhythm of an event collapses into chaos, and every individual reacts instinctively, unpredictably, and emotionally? That's exactly what occurred at Dodger Stadium the moment Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's unsanctioned speech collided with stadium security. The interruption was no longer just a spectacle. It had become a lightning rod, sparking reactions, arguments, and confusion in the stands that mirrored the tension on the field. Fans' reactions were instantaneous and polarized. Some stood in awe, phones raised, live streaming the unprecedented event for audiences worldwide. Others shouted objections, angered by the breach of tradition, the disruption of the game, or simply the audacity of the couple's actions. The murmur of conversation escalated into roars, chants, and heated debates, with each reaction layered atop the last, creating a fractal pattern of chaos that pulsed through the stadium. Imagine being there, surrounded by tens of thousands of people, all processing the moment differently. A father shields his young child's eyes, unsure whether to explain what's happening. A teenager cheers, inspired by the couple's courage to speak openly. An elderly fan shakes their head in disbelief, whispering to neighbors about respect, protocol, and civility. The energy of the crowd became electric, erratic, and almost dangerous, a human pressure cooker primed to boil over. Social media amplified the chaos in real time. Clips of Meghan raising her hand, Harry speaking with intensity, security maneuvering around them, and fans reacting in the stands spread like wildfire. Within minutes, hashtags began trending, and online forums were flooded with heated discussions. Supporters framed the act as brave defiance. Critics labeled it reckless and inappropriate, and neutral observers debated the ethics, legality, and spectacle of it all. The stands weren't just a physical space anymore. They were a microcosm of global public opinion. And the emotional swings in the crowd were dizzying. Laughter erupted sporadically at a subtle joke or witty remark from Meghan. Gasps punctuated Harry's most vulnerable admissions. Boos surged in waves, responding to perceived arrogance, protocol violations, or disruption. The intensity created a feedback loop. The louder the reaction, the more the couple seemed emboldened, which in turn heightened the crowd's response. Every second intensified the spectacle. Security personnel had their hands full. Their primary task was to prevent physical escalation and ensure safety, but the crowd's reactions complicated their strategy. Fans surged forward to get a better view or record the moment, while others pulled back in confusion or frustration. The collective energy became almost physical, pressing in on both the couple and the officers tasked with maintaining order. A delicate balance had to be struck. Intervene too aggressively and risk a public relations disaster. Intervene too lightly and risk chaos and injury. What added fuel to the chaos was the unpredictability of the fans themselves. Individuals within the crowd made spontaneous decisions. Some shouted words of encouragement, others heckled loudly, while small groups tried to engage in organized chants. Some were motivated by support for Meghan and Harry, some by loyalty to the Dodgers, and others by sheer fascination with the spectacle. The cumulative effect was a storm of energy that seemed impossible to control. One particularly striking element was how quickly rumors and misinterpretations spread through the stands. A fan thinking Meghan gestured angrily could spark cheers or boos, depending on interpretation. Someone hearing Harry's frustrated tone might perceive an insult where none existed. The immediacy of human emotion, magnified by thousands of individuals processing the same moment in radically different ways, created an unpredictable environment, a live experiment in social dynamics and crowd psychology. The intensity wasn't confined to the in-person audience. Thousands watching live streams online were reacting simultaneously. Comments flooded in, alternating between awe, anger, disbelief, and support. Social media algorithms detected the spike in engagement, spreading clips even further, turning the stadium incident into an international spectacle within minutes. Fans in the stands felt this too. They were no longer isolated. They were participants in a global conversation that magnified every cheer, gasp, and chant. And yet, amidst the chaos, subtle alliances formed. Small groups of fans began debating politely, despite the surrounding tumult, exchanging interpretations of the couple's words. Others formed defensive perimeters around those filming or supporting Meghan and Harry, signaling a spontaneous effort to manage their environment. Human behavior in these moments is fascinating. Even in chaos, instinctive systems of order and support emerge, layered atop the chaos. Security recognized these dynamics and attempted to use them strategically, guiding crowd movement subtly, creating pathways, and maintaining buffer zones. It was as if the stadium had become a living organism. Every action by the couple, every word spoken, and every movement by security triggered cascading reactions throughout the audience. Emotional spikes rippled outward, amplified, and collided, creating unpredictable, high-stakes tension. But the crowd itself became an additional player in the unfolding drama. Fans' reactions weren't passive. They influenced every decision made by the couple and security. Meghan and Harry adjusted their gestures in response to supportive cheers, their tone modulating slightly in response to boos. Security officers hesitated or advanced depending on the audience's intensity. The speech, the standoff, and the reaction of the crowd had become intertwined in a delicate, volatile dance, with stakes escalating by the second. At one point, a surge of excitement in the stands, a cheer for a particularly pointed statement, created a ripple effect. Nearby fans leaned forward, their reactions prompting even more attention, pushing the tension toward a peak. Security officers, sensing potential danger, moved more aggressively, creating tighter formations around the couple. Meghan and Harry, recognizing the movement, subtly adjusted their positioning, maintaining both visibility and defiance. The energy in the stadium was now almost tactile, a physical presence pressing on everyone within earshot. The chaos had consequences. A few fans were jostled accidentally, some spilled drinks, and arguments erupted spontaneously. Phones were held high to record evidence, proof, or entertainment. The atmosphere was electric but fragile, a powder keg of human emotion, perception, and reaction. The tension had become its own character in the unfolding drama, unpredictable and yet central to the narrative of the event. And then, just as the energy in the stands seemed to crest, a new layer of intensity emerged. Rumors spread among fans. They're going to get arrested. They might get banned forever. This is going to make headlines worldwide. The whispers became shouts, shouts became chants, and the entire stadium buzzed with anticipation, fear, and excitement. Fans realized that they were witnessing not just an unusual